Welcome, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, a Victory Monday edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. I am John Ledyard from pewterreport.com. With me today is the one and only Scott Reynolds, also from pewterreport.com. Scott, we are here to talk about the process of the Bucs trimming down this roster, trying to get to 53 players from this, 79 or 80 with which they played in the third preseason game. And it started with this guy up on the screen, Tanner Hudson, but we're going to talk about a lot of those moves as we roll through today on the show. We've got those roster cuts to talk about. We'll talk a little bit about that third preseason game, what we liked, what we didn't like, as we've had time to rewatch and reflect. It's going to be a fun show today.
It is. And, you mentioned Victory Monday. John, I think we're going to have Victory Monday quite often this year. Yep. I would suspect that with this loaded Tampa Bay team, offense, defense, maybe special teams, we'll see. But certainly I think we're going to see a lot of Victory Mondays. And that's good news for not just the Buccaneers, but their fans and everyone out there in Pewter Nation watching us right here on Pewter Report's podcast.
Absolutely. And it's all brought to you by our friends over at Celsius.com. Celsius is the best energy drinks on the planet. We have gotten about, I want to say at least 25% of football media hooked on Celsius.
Yes.
I've seen all these NFL Twitter people just talking about Celsius. I sent some to a few, and they have just loved Celsius and been hooked on it. It powers active lives every day with essential functional energy. I've got the sparkling strawberry guava, which I haven't even had in a while. You've got the classic orange there. Yep. Healthy energy, accelerates your metabolism. It burns body fat. It's no sugar. As Dalton Miller, I saw it, Cowboys media person on the radio down there, said today, I saw him tweet, he said Celsius is blowing his mind because it gives him the energy for the day, but there's no crash. There's no jitters. Right. There's nothing like that to delay his productivity. So I'm telling you, folks, check out Celsius. It's a beautiful product. It comes in many different flavors. They're all good. And you can use the store locator and find the Celsius near you. But go on Amazon and search Celsius. You can get a variety pack. You can use the subscribe and save option, right, Scott? You can save yourself some money while you're ordering.
And they ship Celsius. It right to your door. That's the beauty. It's like Amazon just brings it right to the door. You save money. You buy it in bulk. You never run out. It's the way to go. And I will say this, and I don't want to invite any criticism because we're not going to do that. We're going to save the criticism for the Buccaneers and their opponents, not Celsius. But the thing is, John, I've never heard anybody say, I tried it and didn't like it. It's always like, tried it, I loved it, and I found new flavors I love. I mean, we've never had any type of advertising partner, any type of sponsor elicit such strong, unsolicited, unprompted feedback as Celsius. And that tells me that they make a great product, and we're proud to be partners with them here on the Pewter Report podcast.
Absolutely. And they are sponsoring today's show as they sponsored the game day show this past weekend, in which we had a chance to talk about everything going on with the Bucs as it was happening. While they were in that game against the Texans, we were able to live break things down and give fans insight into players, into the scheme, into all kinds of stuff. It was a blast. We'll continue to do that, obviously, as we move through the season. We've got announcements coming up about that later in the show, so it's going to be it spurred us forward, Scott, into these discussions about roster cuts and in these discussions about who actually makes this Bucs roster this year. And those discussions have started to get narrowed down today because we've seen some of the first roster cuts as the Bucs have begun to whittle that roster down. They probably know all of them, but we only know a percentage of them so far.
Here's we know so far, and it's 4:05 Eastern time here on the Pewter Report podcast on Monday. And this is what we're looking at so far. So Tanner Hudson and fellow tight end Jarrell Adams, Jake Benzinger, the tackle. There's really no surprises there, maybe outside of Hudson. But John, you and I have been talking about the fact that they may keep only 3 tight ends for so long, and we have not heard Cody McElroy's name yet. But I gotta figure he didn't have a strong game there in Houston. Matter of fact, he whiffed on maybe 1 or 2 of the block attempts that allowed Jose Borregales' field goal and extra point to be blocked. So I don't think he's going to make it. That's not official. That's just my opinion. Defensively, Javon Hagan, I think Ross Cockrell's addition to the safety group probably, led to his demise from the roster. Joe Jones, we just didn't see him elevate. He had the nice pick 6 against the Bengals in preseason game 1. We didn't see him elevate past KJ Britt. KJ Britt will be the 4th linebacker. We'll see if they keep Grant Stewart as well. Antonio Hamilton, surprise cut. We'll talk about him in a second. Elijah Ponder, outside linebacker, as well as Kobe Smith. But John, let's start with the offense. Let's get your thoughts on Tanner Hudson. I'd like to think the Buccaneers, if he does clear waivers, possibly bring him back for the practice squad. They like his receiving ability, but he's got to do more to make the roster, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think the thing with Tanner Hudson is I wonder, yes, he could come back to the practice squad, but I also wonder if the Bucs are just kind of ready to move on. Like, they've tried to develop him. He is not fit what they do. It's just that simple. You know, I think he's a really good receiving tight end. I think he can go somewhere else in the NFL, Scott, be a number 2 tight end, be a guy who plays in certain teams, 12 personnel packages, and provide some value. You know, once you get to 12, 13, you're out on the edges of the blocking scheme. You don't necessarily need to be as good a blocker. And some teams will willingly sacrifice that kind of stuff if you can give them what he can give in the receiving game. And so that's why I think it's huge that Tanner Hudson shows what he has when he has that opportunities. Can things and aspects of his game improve? Absolutely, they can. But at the same time, Scott, I think we are talking about a player here that has NFL ability. Like, that's not in question.
Well, he's got NFL receiving ability,
right?
And I wonder too, John, if the Buccaneers just have had their fill with Tanner Hudson and just say this guy kind of is what he is. He's kind of a one-trick pony in terms of being able to catch the ball, but he's a liability as a blocker. Doesn't factor in too much on special teams. We saw last year, even Anthony Auclair, who ended up making the roster as the 4th tight end, the blocking tight end, if you will, helping out on special teams. Once he got hurt, they said, you know what, we can use this other offensive lineman that we have dressed in a reserve capacity, Joe Haig, as that extra blocking tight end, and we can essentially free up a roster spot elsewhere on game day. And so I think they kind of discovered last year they could get away with having 3 tight ends because they can use a blocking offensive lineman as that extra tight end in run formations. And
you'll see that again.
Yeah, and it might be Robert Hainsey. It might be Josh Wells. It might be Nick Leverett. Whoever they dress, it might be Aaron Stinney. But I think that they'll find one of those offensive linemen and put them in the Joe Haig role and maybe even throw a pass to him like they threw to Joe Haig, and we'll see who's got the best hands out of that group.
Yeah, and you may see that again. I'll clarify what I was going to say earlier. You may see that again, but more than likely, I think that was kind of a deviation, right, when things started happening, I think, especially with O.J. Howard, how capable a blocker is he? Well, the other night, O.J. Howard took encouraging steps as a blocker. I thought he did some good things in that game as a blocker. I don't think he's ever going to be a great blocker, but as I said, when you get into extra personnel and you are out on the fringes, you're blocking more safeties and corners, and can he handle that kind of work? I think that he can. And so, yeah, I am very curious to see what they do with that with a potential 4th tight end slot. I agree with you. I don't think Cody McElroy is going to make the roster. But the biggest concern with me, why did Anthony Auclair make the roster last year going into the season? He made it as the 4th tight end, and he made it because they believed he was a blocker. I don't think he was a blocker, but they believed that, and he was a better option than Tanner Hudson. And that's what they need. If they're going to carry a 4th tight end, he must block. That is going to be his role. And they thought Joe Haig could fill a role like that last year, and it was fine. They drawback at the end of the day, but still, that is something that I believe that they look at this season and they're like, okay, if we could get that guy to be a blocker and we can throw the ball to him, great. So it's funny that the Bucs have built a roster with almost all receiving tight ends and not blocking tight ends because they really do ask more of their tight ends in both pass protection and just in their run scheme. You're often ISO'd on a D end or you're part of a double team block.
Right.
Those aren't always common things. A lot of teams are just split zone and bring your tight end across and have them cut a guy or get in a guy's way. And the Bucs just ask a lot more from the position. Than
you're right. We've seen Cam Brate line up in the backfield as a fullback on occasion, depending on the formation. And so that's another, reason why I think that the tight ends that they keep, they need to be able to do both. Cam Brate doesn't do it great. O.J. Howard doesn't do it great. We saw O.J. Howard get kind of blown up in the backfield, and that led to the fumbled exchange between Keyshawn Vaughn and Kyle Trask. So as many people want to fault Vaughn or Trask for that, I mean, you go back and look at the film, O.J. Howard got blown up, and he was just as big of a culprit as either one of those guys.
Yeah, for sure. And somebody asked, the Bucs expecting too much out of the tight end position because Gronk is at such a high level. We're getting off the cuts track here, but I still think it's a good question by Harvinder. I've argued that, yes, I think that you don't want a run scheme that's reliant on tight ends and wide receivers as blockers. It does not matter if they're Gronkowski or Godwin. Those guys are obviously good blockers for their position. It doesn't matter. You just don't want a run scheme built on relying upon those kind of players. Godwin is a good blocker for a wide receiver, but there's just a limited amount of times that a wide receiver is going to actually block a linebacker. And that's true for Godwin. And if you watch tape of every block by Godwin, you will see what I mean. He is not going to handle linebackers one-on-one all the time. It might happen on occasion, and those are probably the reps you see someone post on Twitter. He's a good blocker, but what they ask him to do a lot of times in that scheme is just not fair for a wide receiver.
Right.
And so, yeah, I do think that this is a good point, Harvinder, and something that I think is part of the weakness of the run game is you rely on too many variables first, too many variables to eliminate too many variables for the other team. And two of those can be at times, a tight end and a wide receiver. That's no bueno in the run game. You don't want that. If Hagan is out, Cockrell, the fourth safety, we'll see, Richard. It's either that or Chris Cooper made it as a special teamer. Yeah. We haven't heard anything about Chris Cooper yet. That's true. I think it's probably the Cockrell's the fourth safety. That'd be my guess, which he didn't necessarily tackle great in the preseason games, but his coverage was good.
Right. And the fact that they're going to keep 3 tight ends, at least that's what we're suspecting right now, means there will be another position that will have a bonus player. It might be wide receiver. They might keep 7, and that would mean Jalen Darden and Jaden Mickens are at least on the roster for week 1, or at least for the time being. It might mean they keep 5 defensive backs at the safety position. And maybe like John said, Ross Cockrell makes it as that utility player that can play safety and cornerback. And maybe Chris Cooper makes it as a special teams ace. We saw Ryan Smith really not even factor in at cornerback the last couple of years, but he was a gunner. And, you could kind of say that Keyshawn Vaughn has kind of taken on that role this year where he doesn't do much other than being a gunner. I don't see any reason why you'd want to give Keyshawn Vaughn the ball.
Okay, can we pause on Keyshawn Vaughn? We've got a lot of questions about the running back group on the Bucs. So let's just everybody who's asked a Keyshawn Vaughn related question, which I see is several of you or made a Keyshawn Vaughn related comment or a Bucs running back who's going to start related comment. This is the section we're going to attack that stuff right now. Okay, starting running back for the Bucs week 1, Scott. Is it Ronald Jones?
Yes, it is Ronald Jones. No doubt about it.
And Leonard Fournette is still going to start the season getting 50% of the carries?
Well, I think it's going to depend. I think you're going to see what has happened dating back to Bruce's first year in 2019 when it was Peyton Barber as the starter and Ronald Jones as the backup. You had typically the starter would get the first 2 series. Then you would have the backup running back come in and get the 3rd series. And they would kind of be a determination based upon how the starter fared in those first 2 series and how the backup fared in that 1 series. Then you would see the shift take place kind of because you're talking about into the second quarter right now before halftime. So the second half would kind of be determined in terms of the carries on who performed better. And to Ronald Jones's credit, he outperformed in those situations with lesser first half carries. He ended up getting more carries in the second half, beating out Peyton Barber back 2 years ago for that starting running back job. And I think that's kind of how it's going to play out. You're going to see both running backs see some time in the first half, and Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich will go with the hot hand in the second half. And it's going to be kind of a week-to-week thing. I mean, this is the NFL. It's not for long, and that means starting jobs unless you're performing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're right about that. But I also wonder how quickly can Ronald Jones show him he's the hot hand. I hope that happens pretty quickly. But we'll see what happens, obviously, with those 2 guys in that matchup and Giovanni Bernard as well. The other aspect of this is Keyshawn Vaughn, Scott. You wrote pretty, I think, fairly, but also you're done. Like, you just sounded done when you wrote in 2-point conversion. What's the move with Keyshawn Vaughn? First, what would you do with him at this point? As cuts near and are here, obviously nobody really expects him to get cut. Is there a move that can be made? There are obviously teams out there that have lost running backs in the preseason that might be interested in making a move. He's a 3rd-round pick. A couple of years ago, you still have contract control for cheap over a running back who's not going to get a chance in Tampa.
Yeah, he just has such limited film. And you look at Keyshawn Vaughn, I believe he did average 4 yards per carry during the regular season on a handful of opportunities. He did have a receiving touchdown. He's also had some drops and some fumbles. His preseason film did not look great. I don't know how any team is out there jonesing to trade for Keyshawn Vaughn. And just because he was a third-round pick by the Buccaneers doesn't mean that a team would give Tampa Bay anything close to that, because he has not put the film out there to warrant such a high pick. If Sony Michel, a former first-rounder, can fetch a fourth-rounder, you can kind of do the sliding scale math and say, well, a third-round pick who didn't really do much last year as a rookie, doesn't have a lot of great film, certainly from the preseason didn't wow anybody with a 2-yard per carry average and in doing virtually nothing on kick returns. I think the only value he has to Tampa Bay, from my eyes, is as a gunner, where he did seem to excel. But I think that for whatever reason,
is still a big part of gunner. You know what I mean? It is.
There's no doubt.
And I don't know what that's going to look like for him. We just don't have enough sample size. That worries me. So
the problem with being a gunner is if you don't make the tackle, you are one of the far contained guys on the sideline. So if you miss the tackle, you're essentially giving up the sidelines. And you just do the math and looking at the entire field as all 10 of those guys come down the field. If you give up one sidelines, half of your guys in coverage are on the other side of the field, and they're probably not going to make the play. So it's very dangerous to give up the sidelines. You want to force things to the middle where there's certainly more bodies. So you're right.
If you can at least slow guys down when you hit them.
Yes,
that is a big part of your job. Not every gunner is going to make the tackle. It's a really hard tackle to make for a gunner, but yeah, you got to be in the zip code. I think you got to force a change by the ball carrier at least. So there's still no sure thing with Keyshawn Vaughn. I don't feel super crazy about giving him a hat on game days, but we'll see if that happens on special teams. One cut that made me think it's possible is the fact that Antonio Hamilton not going to be on this roster. I thought he looked really good as a gunner. He's played really well as a gunner throughout his career. Maybe he comes back to the practice squad. We'll see. This was the only cut, I'll just say, that I feel like I kind of disagreed with. I know that he wasn't necessarily at his best Saturday night, but I still feel like he's a guy that's in the right spot very consistently defensively. He still had good plays in run defense. He still was right there contesting catches. He isn't a great athlete, but he seems like a very smart player, well-rounded player that gives them some options on defense. And so I would have liked to see a guy like that stick around. Now, if he's on the practice squad, I'm not going to, complain. Obviously, I thought D. Delaney deserved a spot. Will they keep 6 corners? That's the other part of this, Scott. Is it 5 and Delaney won the 5th spot and that's it? Or is Cockrell a safety full time now? And then is Delaney 4? And then they'll almost certainly keep another corner if Cockrell's not going to practice a corner at all, I would guess. So he would be like an emergency corner, I guess Cockrell would be in that regard. So I'm not sure what's going to happen here. It's just a very interesting.
It will be
We've got to
interesting.
get a feel from Bruce after these cuts as to how they're going to use these guys.
I think the one hint that Bruce gave us about Hamilton was the fact that he primarily played inside in the slot. And I think with Sean Murphy-Bunting and the fact that Ross Cockrell can come in and play the slot too, as well as Mike Edwards, if they're looking to try to get him on the field. He's played the slot before, and he's a safety, so that's kind of in his wheelhouse. What they were looking for are more outside corners, right? If something happens to Jamel Dean, if something happens to Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting can play both. That gives some good flexibility, but they were looking for another outside corner. That they felt like they had enough inside corners, and so I think that gave D. Delaney a natural advantage over Antonio Hamilton. But I agree with you. You and I saw Hamilton the right way, the same way, I should say, in that I thought he played pretty well in special teams. It just was a matter of he didn't have a great game in coverage against the Texans. Yeah. And Herb Miller might have redeemed himself a little bit. They like Herb's size. He is an outside corner. He can play special teams. He came up with the diving interception. And just when you thought pretty good about Herb Miller and how he helped himself, boom, all of a sudden D. Delaney, his primary competition, comes out and gets 6 tackles, 2 interceptions,
picks, couple pass breakups.
Breaks up a fourth 2-point conversion attempt in the fourth quarter.
Would have given up a touchdown. Quarterback overthrew the fade route, so it doesn't look bad for him. No, it was. And Delaney had he was so good in the preseason to me, even despite some of those, plays that nobody's going to talk about because they weren't on the stat sheet, that I felt like, I understood him beating out Hamilton. That made sense to me. And he looks athletic. There might be some upside with Delaney. Like I'm like totally compelled to like want to see more of him. I know that's not going to happen hopefully until next year if everybody's healthy, but Hamilton is kind of what he is, I think. So I understand that move. But again, how many corners do they keep? I'm in favor of being very deep at that position. I think Hamilton can play in the NFL and can help you in a corner. That's just really valuable. It's like, to me, that quarterback and corner are like, after quarterback, corners like up there with the most valuable positions because you need so many. They need to do so many things in today's NFL that having good players really helps.
You're right, and you're playing in a division that you're still looking at. Even though Drew Brees is gone, Jameis Winston can throw the hell out of the football, right? I mean, Sean Payton is a pass first kind of guy. Yeah, even their running back is probably their best receiver on the team in Alvin Kamara, right? So the Saints will throw the ball as long as Matt Ryan's in Atlanta. Atlanta will throw the ball. They just drafted Kyle Pitts in the first round. He's a receiving tight end / hybrid.
Ridley's there. He's a first round pick.
Yeah, he's a massive target for the passing game. And then you look at Carolina, right, with their coordinator. They just traded for Sam Darnold. They're going to see if he works this year. There's been some rumors or whispers that they might be in the Deshaun Watson market. Watson could throw the hell out of the football. He's got some ability, but he is a passing quarterback first. So this NFC South now and in the future is going to be pass first, and that's just how it is in Tampa as well. So, yes, John, you need the defensive backs. You need at least 10, if not more, defensive backs between the corners and the safeties. And they got a couple guys, and you mentioned Ross Cockrell, a guy that can play both, and that's great versatility.
Absolutely. That Ross Cockrell is kind of the pivot player for this team right now. I've seen some people mention him as a potential cut on the comments. Don't expect that to happen, folks. We haven't even considered or weighed that possibility. Ross Cockrell has been, helping this team as a nickel. He can play outside. He can play in any coverage scheme. He can play safety. So there's just a lot that he gives you because of how smart of a player he is. Got just a great feel on the field. And so he's definitely going to be around. No question about that. Gator country with a good point here. Tampa, best front office in the NFL. They know how to draft late. That's how you build depth and early. I mean, early rounds and mid rounds is really how they've really made their money. I mean, there's been some late hits too, but
and the thing is I've been very frank with the Pewter Report audience. Maybe some of the newcomers are new to this take, but I've been accused certainly in years past of being, a Jason Light apologist. I've always believed in what Jason was doing. All the decisions have not hit, and I've been critical of the ones that haven't. I mean, the Roberto Aguayo, the Jameis Winston situation didn't work out. Keyshawn Vaughn, exactly. I mean, I've criticized Jason. He knows that. But the thing is what I've even told him to his face. I said, I believe in you, and the day I don't believe in you anymore, you'll know it. But I believe in your process, and it's taken some time. And I've agreed with the vast majority of what he's done. And it's not about kissing ass. It's not about anything other than just like, hey, I think this is working. And I take no credit for it because I didn't make one single personnel decision. That's all him and John Spytek and Mike Greenberg and the coaches and the front office people and the capologist. But the thing is I saw the vision and what they were doing. And the reason why Tom Brady chose Tampa Bay is because the roster was built and he was the missing ingredient. The quarterback that could be the trigger man, not turn the ball over. But Mike Evans, his first ever draft pick, was here, right? Chris Godwin was here. The offensive line was here. The defense was here. Todd Bowles and Bruce Arians were here. And Light, it took some time. You go back to 2014. The cupboard was bare in 2014. No wonder why they went to 2-14. Light made a bunch of horrible personnel decisions that year, but he learned from it quickly, cut his losses, and you're right, Gator Country, that they do have the best front office in the league. It took some time. Jason Light's a very quick learner, and in this thing, it seems like it came together pretty quickly. But I saw what he was doing, the thought process behind it. We had some conversations about what he wanted to do. He's like, listen, this is not going to happen overnight. We're going to take some lumps along the way. We're going to try some things. Jameis Winston was a 5-year trial, right? It didn't work out. But along the way, this offense was being built under Dirk Cutter, under Bruce Arians, and they switched out the quarterback position, and it made a world of difference. It just did.
Yeah, absolutely. They've built the team the right way, no question about that. Having said that, it was a good question on here, from Harvinder. Brady aside, which position worries you the most? if the starter is out? It's a good question. I spent some time thinking about that and may write about it some too before the season starts. Outside of the quarterback position, I think you obviously feel pretty good at wide receiver, at tight end, even at running back. But the interior O-line, I think offensive tackle is the one that, if somebody went down, especially like a Donovan Smith, for example, or Tristan
exactly
Wirfs,
who I was thinking, Donovan Smith.
Right, like if you would need to call, so I don't think you could just ride with Josh Wells the rest of the season. Like if it were a serious injury, I think it would be like a call Russell Okun, see what he's doing.
Yes.
Call Mitchell Schwartz if it was a right tackle, and see where his back's at, see where his health is at.
Right.
You would need to make a move there. I think bring somebody in, get him acclimated to your offense. Not that I think Josh Wells is horrible, but he's not a full season starter. He's not.
I agree.
He can get you out of a game if you
totally
can scheme
agree
around
John.
it, but that's it.
Yeah, I go back to a conversation. I learned an awful lot of football from John Gruden. He and I, we had beers together, lunches together, just conversations together. And I remember going back to when he was telling me about his interview with Al Davis for the head coaching job out there with the Raiders. And Al Davis asked him, what's the most important position in football? Give me your top 5. And it's quarterback. It's left tackle. It's the guy protecting the quarterback. It's your top edge rusher, the guy that's going to put the pressure on the quarterback. Number 3. Number 4 is the top shutdown cornerback, right? And of course, this all revolves around the passing game, right? Quarterback, left tackle, pass rusher, cornerback, and then whatever your scheme is, that kind of determines what number 5 is. On defense, offense, whatever. But those are really the top 4. And so number 2 on the list, John, is left tackle. It's so critical. That's why you see so many teams try to draft offensive tackles, left tackles so high. And I think that's what gives the Bucs some value with Tristan Wirfs. I think that Tristan Wirfs would slide over to the left side, because what you want to do is try to have that left tackle be out there on the island. It's much easier if you've got a shaky situation at right tackle to keep a tight end in, to keep a running back in on that side. That's the side where pressure, if it comes to the quarterback's going to see it. With the blind side, that's where quarterbacks get hurt. That's where you see the sack, strip sacks, the sack fumbles. That's where Joe Tryon-Shoyinka got Tyrod Taylor on Saturday night from behind and with the strip sack. So I think that you're right. Left tackle is key. Donovan Smith might not be the second best player on this team, but he certainly might play the second most important position on this team. And it's probably that way with a lot of teams. Left tackle is really where it's at.
Right. And somebody said the things have changed a lot. If we're talking about Donovan Smith as the second most important player on offense, it's just like value in terms, and also what's behind him too. That's what matters. I mean, we wouldn't rank Donovan Smith high if we were ranking the 11 starters, although he's probably always been better and more valuable than Bucs fans believe that he is, and certainly has gotten more that way. There's still bad reps here and there, but I mean, one of the things that was a prevalent takeaway just before we move on to the super chat is that when I will rewatch those starter snaps, the protection for Brady was just so good. And then when it wasn't perfect, and that's the NFL, like protection will never be you set a guy and you crush him 5 reps, and then all of a sudden he hits a counter. Like you don't know when that counter's coming. You know what I mean? Like pass pro is so hard to be 100% clean at all the time. And Brady just made him right whenever, like Donovan Smith had some great sets, took down Whitney Merciless, was just crushing him. Then Merciless hit a spin move, and I don't know what would have happened. Smith was kind of trying to recover, and it was kind of hard to tell. He fell out of phase for a second, and Merciless stumbled a little bit, and it was like, this could have been like inside move, get a hit on Brady, but Brady just, boom, balls out.
Yeah.
You know, he senses when those things are coming. So I just hope that everybody kind of remembers that, like, this is a team sport. It is not one person. So we talk about at times, if you lose this individual, if you lose that individual, but when protection is good, Brady thrives. When protection is bad, Brady still has thrived. Yes, if it were a total train wreck like that Saints game last year when they got crushed, then it would be harder for him, no question. But I still feel like this is a guy who, even when the lines aren't perfect, can make plays because his mind moves at that type of pace. So everything helps each other, and I don't want to individualize the game too much. Lawrence Lowe with the $5 super chat. Lawrence, hugely appreciate that. Bucs fans need to let go in order for us to become better. Fans want the wins. It comes with cutting the Winstons, McCoys, and the Hudsons.
Well, he's Mr. August, John. I mean, he's a fan favorite every August. That's
that
just
caught me by surprise.
Yeah. Right.
That's true. The Winstons, the McCoys, and the Hudsons. Yes, the
Yeah.
Tanner Hudsons. Yeah, up there with Gerald.
One of these three don't belong.
That's right.
You know.
But I like I said, I do think my big thing is somebody claim Tanner Hudson if you're another team. I mean, maybe the Bucs don't want that, and maybe they would like to have him back, but he's good. He can play. He can play in today's NFL. You see some of the tight ends that produce in today's NFL, like there's not a lot of good ones. Like he can play as a top 2 tight end for somebody who doesn't ask so much of him as a blocker. So hopefully he gets that opportunity.
Right.
But
now, just to clarify things, I mean, Bendix, Jameis can be good with a good supporting cast. I mean, he had Chris Godwin, he had Mike Evans, he had Scotty Miller.
Right. Jameis being good somewhere else will have nothing to do with what happened in Tampa Bay. The scheme was perfect for him. Both schemes that he played in were great for him.
The offensive line was the same minus Tristan Wirfs.
Yeah, it got better, certainly, but still a good line. Like Jameis was the problem way more often than not. You know, and that may be totally different in New Orleans. And good for him if it is. But you can't look at it was Tampa Bay's like just ridiculous.
Yeah, you can't say he didn't have a good supporting cast here. I mean, in 2019, he had 2,000-yard Pro Bowl receivers, right?
Like,
so
they surrounded him with everything.
Yeah,
it didn't work, and maybe it won't work anywhere. We'll see, but it wasn't the Bucs' fault, no matter what happens somewhere else. All right, so these roster cuts are just underway, Scott. There are many more to come. Yes. And what kind of other moves are you expecting? Do you think there will be any surprises in the rest of the roster cuts? We've talked a little bit about Steve McLendon. Maybe let's hit the pause button there and discuss him for a second. But before we do, because I want to get to that potential roster cut that you've kind of foreshadowed may be coming, I want to let people know about Underdog Fantasy, Scott, because they are changing the game in the fantasy world. And if you want to be a part of it, all you have to do is go to underdogfantasy.com, sign up. Will take you a couple seconds. The link is actually in the description, the YouTube description for this podcast. So click on that link. All you have to do with Underdog Fantasy, it's the best, easiest place to play fantasy football. You sign up, download that app for your computer. It's very aesthetically pleasing. It looks great. It's easy to use. And they give you $25 to play when you sign up. So you can enter their best ball tournament leagues that they have going on. Chances to win $1 million for free just by signing up. They give you $25 to play. Some of these are like $5 entries for a chance to win $1 million. So you get 5 free entries for a chance to win $1 million just by signing up. I can't emphasize how simple this is, folks. They're literally just giving you away money to be able to go and win money. And then if you want to spend some money, they give you some to be able to play fantasy football. We've probably got 50, 60 people signed up in leagues with us. We've got a $50 league that, by the way, if you're in the $50 league and you're listening, we still are waiting for like 4 of you to sign up, I think, if you're in that league. But go in and get in there and take Scott's money. That will be a great opportunity. We've got another league drafting tonight. I've got a $25 buy-in league that I'm drafting with tonight at 8 p.m. That's going to be fun with a group of fans. So if you're interested in being in a league, we've got $25 buy-ins. We've got another $50 league we might be putting together if we get enough interest. Just shoot me an email, jon@pewterreport.com, jon@pewterreport.com, and let me know so that I can put you down on the list. And if we are able to fill another league before the season starts, we'll fill another one. We filled like 6 so far, I think. So if you want to be a part of that, just let me know. We'll make something happen for y'all. It's great fun. It's a great time. Underdogfantasy.com. Make sure you check it out. Use that promo code Pewter, PEWTER, to get $25.
We're not going to get too bogged down in the Jameis Winston thing, but I can tell you from talking to somebody, let's just say very close to the offensive line with the Buccaneers, okay? Looking back at Jameis Winston's 2017 season, he was sacked 47 times.
Yeah, okay. Come on.
47 times. To put that in perspective, Tom Brady was sacked 21 times last year. That's 26 more sacks that Winston, who's more mobile than Brady, suffered. Mm-hmm. And why did that happen? Because he was holding on to the ball too long. Okay, that's the thing. Is he was holding on to the ball too long, and he ran around a lot. And from what my sources at team headquarters tell me at the Advent Health Training Center, what they tell me is that when the coaches went back and graded the film, Jameis Winston, out of those 47 sacks, the coaches gave him 21 of those sacks. So that means the Bucs gave up 26 sacks, which is on par with what they gave up for Tom Brady, which is 21. So that's the difference right there.
Right. Yeah, it's a huge difference. Right. Yeah. And we'll see. Maybe Jameis fixes that part of his game, and maybe
I hope so.
New Orleans gets the ball out quick. I
like Jameis Winston. I hope he does well in New Orleans, except for 2, 3, maybe 3 times per year. So
Yeah, I mean, that's right. No, I we'll see how it goes. And we will talk more about James. We're going to talk more about the NFC South, the NFC in general, and the NFL as a whole next week on the pod, especially the end of this week and into next week on the pod, because we won't have a game to preview until later next week when we start looking at that Bucs Cowboys game a little bit more in depth. But we've got plenty to discuss in that regard. But we are looking at these cuts right now. We talked a little bit about Tanner Hudson, the only one on offense that surprises me. I wouldn't expect to see Jake Benzinger or Jarrell Adams back on the practice squad. We'll see Javon Hagan, I would guess, would be back on the practice squad. Antonio Hamilton could be as well.
And,
I think Elijah
really the thing with Javon Hagan, two things. Number one, I thought he had a kind of a bad game in coverage on Saturday night. He was in the vicinity for both of those touchdowns. I don't know exactly what his responsibilities were.
Yeah, we got no good replay angles on Saturday night. That was a huge gripe from us. We got like 2 or 3 replays, and they weren't great angles.
Right.
So.
But the thing is I think that his coverage was lacking in that particular game. Yes, he did have a nice sack fumble, which was a designated blitz called by Todd Bowles. He does have some versatility. He can up on special teams, but Ross Cockrell just made more plays in practice than Javon Hagan did. And his versatility to be able to play special teams, corner, and safety, that just kind of gave him that fourth safety spot. I do think Hagan maybe comes back on the practice squad, like you mentioned, John, but that's the reason why. Hagan had a good camp and played well in that first preseason game, but just didn't show enough.
He can play. He's aggressive. He's physical. He can stick somewhere, I think. I don't think it's out of the question for him to still make this team eventually.
Correct.
He got better. I thought even we finally got to see him in preseason. He's a player I'd love to see stick around. I'd be happy if he was on the practice squad. Yeah. He plays with anticipation at times. He's not super explosive or crazy athletic or anything, but I definitely think there's something there with him. He's not limited by size or any like fatal flaw in my mind that I've seen exposed so far.
Right.
So I would love to keep developing him, and I'd love to see Chris Cooper come back to the practice squad too. Haven't seen much from him on defense, but he's tackled well and he clearly has some special teams ability. And so I think both those guys could make him 16-person practice squad. I think those guys could make it. John Ward wants to know if Ponder could make it. In my mind, Ponder should make it. You know, with Quentin Bell hurt or waived. And then Ladarius Hamilton.
The practice squad, right? Being on the practice squad.
Yes, being on the practice squad. For Ponder, being on the practice squad. I just thought he was better than Quentin Bell. Thought he was better than Ladarius Hamilton. You know, who Hamilton actually, he got better as camp went on too, but you know, either of those guys in the practice squad will be fine for the Bucs purposes. I think Cam Gill, what's going to happen with him? Is it a waive? Does he get to injured reserve? How do they treat that? And that brings us back to the Steve McLendon part of the conversation, right, Scott? What do you anticipate happens with Steve McLendon in the coming hours?
It was really interesting, the fact that he did not play on Saturday night. And what made it even more interesting is the fact that when you look at it, the fact that Ndamukong Suh wasn't there, right, due to COVID, so needed another defensive tackle. Now, you don't need to see Steve McLendon, right, just because you know what you're getting from the 35-year-old vet. But at the same time, you would think that they might have put him out there for a couple snaps because, of course, they played for Raheem Nunez-Roches, and he's kind of on the level. I think Raheem Nunez-Roches slightly ahead of Steve McLendon on the depth chart because he can play both nose and the 3-tech spot. So I just don't know. The problem is there's enough of the young defensive linemen that showed up and showed out during the preseason. We saw Jeremiah Ledbetter have a fantastic game, not just on defense, but recovering Keyshawn fumble. Maybe we'll call
might
him
as well.
Fumble.
I mean, that might as well be his name.
Keyshawn Vaughn's fumble
got a new segment here
on special teams. Yes, we have Leonard and we have Keyshawn fumble. You know, but that I think is really helping his cause. Now, he might not make the roster. He might be on the practice squad, but Khalil Davis, John, you and I both liked what this guy did in camp and practice. He's just twitchier than any of the other defensive linemen. Yeah. And Pat O'Connor is he's just a barbarian. I mean, I love POC because he is, and he's gotten so much better at anticipating the snap count, yet not jumping off sides. He is a one-gap penetrator. The guy goes balls to the wall, 1,000 miles an hour. He's not the best athlete. He's not the best tackler, but he will be disruptive, get back there and make some things happen. We saw him get a sack.
He needs to play some on defense, Scott. And maybe I'll end up getting dragged if he plays and he's terrible and it's only preseason. But I mean, he was out there against a lot of the Texans starters. I know it's not their full starting O-line or anything, but he was out there against some of those guys and he was whooping them. Like his first step, I paused the tape. His first step, he's the first guy off the ball all the time. Last 2 preseason games. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. We got to see more of it. Obviously, he's played so little in the NFL that it's hard to know, but when you're explosive, I really think it's the most important trait when you play up front. There are other things that matter. You can be explosive and still end up being bad if you miss at a lot of other things.
Right.
I don't think he's bad enough in those other areas for it to be a killer thing for him. In my opinion, he has soundly outplayed Raheem Nunez-Roches this preseason, especially the other night. I mean, I thought he was clearly better than Nacho, who can be a little bit feast or famine with everything that he does. Sometimes it's great. He'll just try to gap shoot and get way too far upfield, and he's different than the other guys on the Bucs team. But yeah, I really think Pat O'Connor. He's not as versatile as Nacho. Nacho can play the nose if you need him to,
and he's just a bigger guy. He's 305, 310.
I don't know if you ever want to see POC in the A gaps, but
no, that's not ideal, right? But certainly, we saw his development last year. I mean, listen, he got a sack last year when Anthony Nelson only had one. Now Nelson got another one in the postseason against Washington, but I like what Pat O'Connor does. He blocked the punts on special teams out there in Denver. He's a core special team guy. I think that those 3 guys, Khalil Davis, Pat O'Connor, and Jeremiah Ledbetter, the upside there is so much better for this team now because all of those guys can play.
Right.
Maybe not as stout as Steve McLendon with his experience, but you're not losing much, I think, with any of those other 3 players. Plus, you're gaining a guy in special teams where McLendon really doesn't play in special teams, maybe outside of the field goal extra point unit. Mm-hmm. But for the long haul, you're going to lose Ndamukong Suh probably next year. He's 34 years old. He's got a couple twins. He's business-minded. He's made his millions. Mm-hmm. I think he's gunning for a ring again, then he wants to retire. That's my take. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I think that's what happens. So why would you want to have 2 defensive tackles on your roster, age 34 and 35, and you're going to lose both next year, and you're taking a chance with Khalil Davis slipping through to the practice squad, or Jeremiah Ledbetter with the progress he's made over the last couple of years, or Pat O'Connor.
Right.
I say go with the younger guys. What we're finding is, John, and you study the draft even more than I do, it's harder and harder to find good, quality, impactful defensive tackles coming out of college football in this day and age. I don't know why, but it used to be you could find 3, 4, 5 of them in the first round. And now they're just not nearly as good, not nearly as plentiful. Yeah. And so if that's going to be a position of
run
need,
a couple years ago, and now it's dried up.
It really has. It really has. And so if you've got a couple guys that you've spent time developing, why take a chance on losing one of those guys when you're going to lose Steve McLendon next year at age 36 regardless?
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. The other thing about McLendon, and maybe you mentioned it there, I'm not sure, but he's a vested veteran. So
yes,
McLendon, you can cut him and he is not subject to waivers. So McLendon you could have like a handshake. Hey, we're going to sign you right back. We're going to cut you. We're going to we're going to get through these cuts in the 4 o'clock deadline. We're going to keep somebody else on the roster. We'll move them to injured reserve, like a Cam Gill. It could allow them to keep him on the roster. Then they move him to injured reserve after that cut deadline. And then they open up a roster spot by doing that. And then Steve McLendon comes back onto the active roster. And so I would be surprised, I guess, if McLendon isn't initially cut. I do think he comes back in some capacity. I don't know at that point, you have to weigh the practice squad thing. Like, are you going to keep 7? One thing that I thought was interesting, we'll see what happens with Cooper and with Herb Miller. But if they end up going 8 DBs for whatever reason, because they really feel like Cockrell can be 4th safety, 4th corner, and they're 5 corners, 3 safeties, basically counting Cockrell as a corner. That's risky. I don't necessarily anticipate it happening, but even if they go 8 or 9 DBs and they go 4 linebackers and 9 DBs, which, I mean, heck, I'm going to talk about that in a second. I'd rather have 7 of these interior defensive linemen and then have 5 linebackers when, in my opinion, 2 of them I'm just not that interested in, especially if Khalil Davis and Pat O'Connor are both going to play special teams. You're not losing a ton on special teams if those guys are both going to play. Pat O'Connor plays every special teams group. As long as that's going to continue, I think you can get by without that. Now you need Joe Tryon to play maybe on punt coverage. Maybe that's not something they're interested in, but Bruce Arians sure sounded like he didn't care about that the other day.
Right. Well, the thing about McLendon is he is like the ultimate insurance policy, right? I mean, that's why they traded for him last year. It was a good move in season for Jason Licht and the Bucs defense when Vita Vea went down with that knee injury. He knows this scheme, certainly helped the Bucs win a Super Bowl. So, he does offer that insurance policy for the Buccaneers to the defensive tackle position. Folks, if you haven't heard, it's hurricane season. I think most Floridians know that. And unfortunately, we saw the effects of the latest hurricane to hit New Orleans, and Tampa's had its share of scares this year with the tropical storm. But a couple years ago, gosh, they had to move the season opener back a week for the Buccaneers because of a hurricane. So you want to make sure that you're properly insured. This is the time. We've seen storms come through August, September, even into October. Hurricane season's here for the next couple of months. So make sure that your property is properly insured, whether it's commercial property or whether it's your homeowner's policy. Do what I do. Give Briar Greaves your business. At least give them a phone call. At least give them an email. Send them your policy. Let Briar Greaves and Sam Greaves go ahead and take a look at it and see if they can save you money. And more importantly, make sure that you're properly covered. So life insurance, commercial insurance, homeowners insurance, automobile insurance, boaters insurance, only one place to turn. That's our friends over at Briar Greaves. Check them out on the web at briargreavesinsurance.com or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166, briargreavesinsurance.com.
Absolutely. And we've got so many things coming up on the podcast, Scott, that it's hard to even keep track of all of what we've got coming up just in the next 2 weeks as we get ready for the season.
Yes.
I won't even say days necessarily for these things because we're still ironing out specifics in the schedule. But we'll have tomorrow. I do know we'll be looking at winners and losers of the preseason for the Bucs, who really impressed us and the team, obviously,
as well as final roster cuts, because I'm sure they're going to be releasing some names tomorrow. So don't miss tomorrow's show at 4:00 for sure.
Right, tomorrow 4:00 we'll have more on the roster cuts. We'll have the final list by the time we go live. The deadline is when we go live, so we'll know everything either right before or live on the air. We'll know everything, so we'll break that down. Plus, we'll talk about winners and losers of the offseason based on a lot of those cuts, but also our eyes and also some of what you especially are hearing in the organization, who they're excited about. We'll talk a lot about that on tomorrow's show. We've got guests coming up throughout later in the week that are going to be fun. We'll also take a look around the NFC and what's the competition look like. Here we are, we're on the outset of the season. What's the competition look like in the division and then in the NFL? We'll maybe do even some top 10, rank the top 10 teams, and let's see how many are NFC in that group. After watching Buffalo, Kansas City, and Cleveland over the last couple of days, I was just like, man, those three teams are just loaded. None of them are in the NFC. So, we'll talk about all that coming up on the show in the next couple of weeks.
John,
it's a lot of fun.
It's coming up soon, right? More specifically, September 9th. But if you missed out on Saturday night was the debut of Pewter Game Day, and we covered the Bucs Texans game exclusively here on PewterReport.com and on Pewter Report TV on our YouTube channel. And so we're going to be doing Pewter Game Days every single game now. And what that's going to entail is John Ledyard, Paul Atwall, myself, and some other guests will be piping in to help give you the insight, the analysis, injury updates as they happen. And so if you missed out on Pewter Game Day, go ahead and click it on our Pewter Report YouTube channel and give it a quick look and see what you've missed. But really what it is it's live in-game commentary from John Ledyard and the Pewter Reporters, expert analysis, injury updates. Watch it live on PewterReport.com. So if you have your phone pulled up or your tablet, you can just go to PewterReport.com and watch it live. We're obviously going to be live for that Bucs-Cowboys game on September 9th at about 8:20.
Yeah.
And, of course, following that, it will be the Pewter Report postgame podcast. 1 hour later, we're also going to have a Pewter pregame show before every Pewter Game Day show as well. So wall-to-wall coverage pregame, during the game, postgame, right here on PewterReport.com.
And we're going to have that expert analysis coming in the form of guests too. That's going to be one of the things I'm most excited about. And we're very excited about the first one, the Pewter Report game day. That's going to be regular season edition. We're very excited about that coming up. We'll have more announcements, some graphics and everything like that coming up for you later this week even, but it's going to be a lot of fun and we're thrilled to be able to bring that to y'all. There's going to be so much content, including pregame content. So if you've got pregame plans, you're going to have an opportunity to watch us pregame as we get you set for each of these games as well. We're going to be previewing things up and diving into stats, numbers, players, matchups, things that you don't get anywhere else. So if you are a Bucs fan, you're going to hit the bonanza with PewterReport.com and the Pewter Report podcast this year. So make sure you're subscribed over at Pewter Report TV on our YouTube channel. Hit that like button. Hit the bell, too, for the notifications for when we go live, because we'll be doing that a lot. We're going to be in your living room, hopefully, a lot this season. That's going to be our plan. That relationship with us, y'all and us, or hopefully it continues to take off and grow. But I am thrilled about the guests that we're going to have coming up this week too, obviously, because I think they're going to be a lot this week and for the first game day show, because I think y'all are going to be pretty excited about some of the people that'll be popping into these shows and offering their analysis and thoughts on the Bucs as they play.
No doubt about it. It's going to be a fun week ahead. We have roster cuts coming all through the night. We've got a roster cut tracker on pewterreport.com where every time there is a roster cut, we'll update that tracker. So maybe have that link that open on your browser, open on your phone, and hit refresh, and then it's going to keep you up to date on who the Bucs end up cutting. We'll have that going all the way through till tomorrow at 4:00 when the final cuts are down. So, and then we'll have a practice squad tracker open as well, and that will keep you up to date on which players the Buccaneers end up bringing back to the practice squad, and also maybe which players they plucked from elsewhere. And I wouldn't be surprised. Might be a position or two where the Buccaneers look to make an upgrade over the guys they currently have on either their 53-man roster or the practice squad, and go outside the organization and grab maybe some players they missed out on in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in Bucs Time 12 says, I think prime time will be better this year. Brady knows what down it is. Oh, yes. That will probably be a big part of this. No question about that. Jakey wants to know, are we expecting additional roster cuts tonight still? There is
I would say
a good
yes.
chance that, there will be a few more announced, and agents kind of letting media know basically, hey, our player this or that,
right.
And the additions from the outside are interesting too. There probably will only be one or two would be my guess, but I bet you see some new faces come in here too to the practice squad. And so that'll be always a fun thing to track and take a look at and see who they can remember. Josh Rosen was a year ago, wasn't it? Pretty close to a year ago. He looked good the other night. So so there's definitely a lot to
finally look good. That's like in his fifth team now or something.
I know. Like the ship has sailed. I love how everybody gets excited. Like I'm like, he is barely hanging on to a career. Like there's a decent chance he doesn't get on a roster cuts. He's only his fifth team. I know he's been in bad situations, but come on, like he's a miss.
Talent sticks, John.
Yeah,
talent sticks.
That's right. Exactly. It shines through to more of an extent than he's had, at least at this point. That's your thoughts on the Bucs roster cuts and their situation right now. The one we didn't talk about, Scott, that maybe we can close the show out with real quick here to give people one more thing is linebacker. I am just keep KJ Britt and that's it. I don't need a fifth linebacker on this team, Scott. I just don't. I don't think that Grant Stewart has enough upside or impact. He's not going to get. How does he get a hat on game days? He's not effective enough to do that right now, in my opinion.
I agree.
If you're letting Joe Jones go, which clearly they have, they let Joe Jones go. At this point, okay, Joe Jones I would have kept over Stewart because I know I can get Stewart on the practice squad, and Jones I would have kept if I wanted 5. Now that he's gone, and from his Instagram post, it sounds like they've said, hey, just go pursue another, he's probably going to get a spot somewhere else with a team that needs him a little bit more and doesn't have a Kevin Minter and a KJ Britt on their roster. I'm not interested in keeping Stewart on this roster over guys like Antonio Hamilton and Tanner Hudson and guys like that.
Yeah, not even that, but I would be more open to keeping another outside linebacker, whether they've got just unshakable faith in Cam Gill because he played special teams last year and was an emerging pass rusher. He's been injured most of training camp, missed the preseason altogether. But whether it's a Cam Gill, whether it's, they've already parted ways with Elijah Ponder, but I'm just saying I would rather keep another outside linebacker for the body type, for the speed, maybe another young pass rusher you can develop. You can never have too many good pass rushers. And I know that they added what looks to be an absolute home run in Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. And we've seen the growth and development from Anthony Nelson. He's not going to be as flashy or as athletic as Tryon-Shoyinka is, but maybe they keep an extra outside linebacker, and maybe it's Cam Gill.
Right.
Could be. We'll see how the injury shakes out there.
But I would be fine with 8 linebackers. I mean, outside, inside combined. I would like it if Cam Gill were healthy to stay too, and maybe he ends up being healthy. I don't know. If he's healthy, then I'm fine with him staying.
Right.
But I would think, at this point, let's just go 8 there, and let's go 7 interior D linemen, and let's keep 6 corners, and let's roll with that. That's 3 safeties. That's what I would do at this point if I'm the Bucs, and maybe that's Herb. Maybe Herb makes it. Maybe we get another season of Herb. I wouldn't hate that either. So we'll see. Herb has been a practice squad guy. He's been The
interesting thing too is
guy too.
Flash Gordon reminds us Ladarius Hamilton. I mean, he did have a sack the other night, so
they did.
Yeah, maybe he's a little bit further along than Elijah Ponder. I think both of those guys kind of were twins almost. When I would watch him in practice, similar body types, similar playing styles. With Hamilton, maybe he's just a little bit further ahead than Ponder, but maybe
we'll see. Hamilton's been around a little bit, right? He had a cup of coffee in Dallas, and
correct.
I mean, either way, either guy is whatever at this point. Both can play. Both are competent, I think.
Yes.
So that's good. Good problem to have. All right. So tomorrow we'll be back on the podcast. More roster cuts. We've still got most of the roster cuts to go. Actually, I thought we'd see more at this point. The way rate Greg Allman was cranking them out earlier today, Scott. I thought we were going to see all of them by the time
JC Allen reported the Javon Hagen.
Yeah. Shout out JC, our guy JC, getting the Javon Hagen news up on pewterreport.com. But it's been that tracker will keep you kind of up to date as you go through the moves throughout the evening and so on and so forth. So make sure you follow along with that. And then tomorrow we'll break it all down and we'll talk about the winners and losers from the offseason, guys who impressed us, guys who disappointed us, guys who impressed the team, and guys who may have disappointed the team too. We'll give you some insight into all of that on tomorrow's podcast. Thanks so much to y'all for listening. Until next time, thanks so much for tuning in for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.